everyone. I hope you are enjoying the conference thus far. Sorry I couldn't be there with you this morning. I am really grateful though to be here speaking to all of you. It's a bit surreal, especially since I'm sandwiched between some of the big names in the open source community. I just hope I don't accidentally stumble over their greatness while trying to share my thoughts. But seriously though, I am really excited to talk about my experiences of open source on a continent that is not only so dear and beloved to me, but one that I call home. It is a different type of environment, very different, yet so similar to a lot of other places. Okay, some of you are like, okay, yeah, what do you mean? Well, in a lot of places, you will find that a lot of infrastructure has been already laid out. And here in Africa, we're having to deal with a lot of infrastructure challenges. This particular presentation is a very good example. But the idea being is that despite all of that, we are basically moving on as a people and saying, okay, we may have these issues, but we must go on, or the show must go on. So maybe perhaps I can start by asking, when I speak of Africa, what comes to mind immediately? Could it be this? Or maybe this? Or maybe that? Yeah, you could be right, but there's a whole lot going on. With about 54, 55 countries, 2,100 plus languages, with some estimates at over 3,000, at 1.5 billion people, there's a whole lot more going on. And when you look at just the population, it's basically larger than that of all European countries combined. Most of the population, as in many places, really is in the urban areas. And just like in a lot of other places, both young and old are leaving the village to go in the city in search of jobs and a better life. The old adage that life in the city is better than the village, right? But while this presentation is not a geography lesson, I would like to highlight a story of a continent that, despite its diversity and statistical complexities, showcases a resilient, dynamic, and forward-thinking population. And despite facing significant challenges, including widespread impoverishment in many countries, the Africans are resolute in their pursuit of a brighter future. A little bit about myself. I am Joseph Zikusooka, but I prefer keeping it casual, so you just can call me ZIK, 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 depending on how you do it. I will have a QR code at the end that you can scan. Feel free to contact me directly. I am an indie developer. Right now, I'm putting together a Linux distribution that is customized for rugged and unconnected environments. It's called Jambula OS. Again, it's up on my repositories. It is designed to run on SoC devices like the Raspberry Pi and any kind of device that is low cost, but then can be used in a very harsh and unfavorable environment in terms of connectivity. I've also done a bit of contributions. I am a Linux trainer also by profession. And above all, though, I am a FLOSS advocate. I'm very passionate about open source software. In fact, those who know me will tell you I never shut up talking about open source software. I could go on and on. But when I really started out right after college, it was really mainly Linux. And at the time, you're talking about 15, 20 years ago. I don't want to age myself here, but at that time, there were really fewer solutions, but Linux was the bigger thing. And so I felt like rather than using Windows, and at the time in the US, I was basically installing Linux on family and friends' PCs that I would then, so I would migrate them to Linux. I thought, well, this would be a great idea for Africa. Why are we back home? Why are we using Windows when we could actually use something that was free and openly available? So I sold everything, bought an air ticket, and packed my bags, and I left for Africa. Of course, the dream was to really get Linux everywhere. That didn't go quite well because what I found really was not only just low penetration in terms of FLOSS, there were hardly any communities. In hindsight, I should have known better. In fact, most of the FLOSS projects at the time were really centered around mobile telephony. In Africa, if you look about 15, 20 years ago, that was the time really the mobile telephone was really making headway in a lot of countries. So most of the open source projects were kind of really centered around that. But unfortunately, they didn't. A lot of these were really because they were being nurtured by private firms or startups. There was not really a community around them, so the adoption never really didn't go anywhere. The bigger challenges and really why adoption low is one is the lack of awareness. I do remember going on a local FM radio show when I just returned back to Africa, and I remember a lot of callers because I was talking about Linux and open source in general, and a lot of callers were like so surprised that there was this thing that was called open source software, and that it was even free. In fact, some of them really thought there was a bit of inferiority to it, which wasn't the case. The other thing is just the prestige of a lot of the other proprietary software. There is a lot of prestige associated to that, to it, because most people see it in offices, in organizations, in schools, and everywhere. So someone is like, why should I use something that I'm not familiar with? And there's just so much aggressive, call it vendor locking, especially on the part of like these proprietary companies. When they approach governments, they will really offer lots of incentives. So, for example, why would the government select a proprietary vendor, or why would they not choose a proprietary vendor if they're basically offering, for example, scholarship opportunities to students, travel opportunities, or in a situation where they basically will set up infrastructure for the government, right? You can see really why that is so hard to get over. Sometimes it's even outright kickbacks, right? These are examples that are really happening throughout Africa, even as I speak. There are few certified and experienced FLOSS professionals. I know this firsthand because I've been in a situation where I was called on to fix a Linux server a few years back, and I remember basically finding the IT there on the team, the IT team on the ground already, and basically trying their, trusty, guess and pray method to try and fix things. A bit comical, but that's really, a lot of folks are really learning on the job. But the other issue really is just simply the lack of resources, and of course the systemic corruption that is taking place, whether it is in government, but all the way down to individuals and all that. So those are some of really the reasons I found and I have found that are really hindering that adoption. But unfortunately, there are other infrastructure related issues when you're talking about places like Africa. You know, of course, the major one is internet. You're basically looking at slow speeds, and you're also looking at very expensive internet. You're also looking at issues like shutdowns, government shutdowns. So during, usually typically during election time, you will find in a lot of countries, the government will actually shut down the internet. There's really nothing to do other than just go out and do other things. I remember last year in November, I was basically teaching a class to a group of Mozambican, and I need to check that, but a group of guys in Maputo. And for those of you who know the politics there right now, around that time they were having a lot of protests going on, and literally we just got caught up with interruptions because they would always shut down the internet. I would be in the middle of a class and they would just go off immediately. So it's really an issue. So given that, why even bother, right? I would like to argue that there are cost savings that come about with force deployments. Again, for a lot of these areas, because they really need that money, you know, so the cost saving can really have a huge impact, right? The scaling and the digital divide really leads to many more communities having to collaborate with others in other areas, right? Scaling is good. You want to narrow that that divide. The other thing also is just simply that it just leads to innovation like crazy, right? You create more jobs. So I wanted to just highlight a little bit, just so you get an idea for those who are thinking, for example, Africa, which are the key strategic areas. So one is mining. You all know the fact that Africa is really gifted by a lot of minerals, right? Agriculture, tourism, right? Startups, you know, and SMEs, that's really big. Education, health, research. I know research, sometimes folks don't really think it is happening, but it is critical. Environment. These are areas that that offer really cost effectiveness when you're using FLOSS. Customizable solutions, you're able to offer secure systems, and you're quick. It's quick to innovate, right? It's quick and easy to innovate. The transparency, especially in areas like the environment and when you're doing research, right? Data collection, right? Open source allows for decentralized setups, right? Leading to more resilience. So that is really key for a lot of places, right? But more so here in like in Africa, it's such a big deal, and I do believe that in this sector it will really make a big difference, and is already making a difference. So in terms of strategies, I have categorized them under 5. So they are the advocates. These are folks who are going out and really passionately talking about FLOSS and open source software. They are the trainers, right? These are folks who are really educating and doing what some would call God's work, right? The leaders, these are community leaders. The developers, the folks who are actually writing and maintaining the code, and then of course the vendors, right? What strategies are key? And here I would like to focus the rest of the talk here, because one is for the advocates. It is key to recognize the timing, right? pick the right time, because timing is everything. Like in everything, timing is really everything. But you want to, for example, in Africa, look at moments when you have budgets being developed. So the budget allocation development phase, right? Before it's actually presented to Parliament. Talk to legislators at that time, talk to folks who are actually formulating budgets. During national ICT reviews, that is the time to be doing that, right? Talk to the ICT experts within the countries, right? During summits, regional summits, that's sometimes helpful because you have leaders from multiple countries present in one place. So that would be a good time to really talk to these folks. So, the timing is really key when you actually really do present this. The other thing is to focus. Focus in specific areas. So, for example, government and then schools, right? Governments, for example, you really want to be talking to policymakers. Why? Because these guys know where they've set up already infrastructures in a lot of local communities, right? So you really don't want to reinvent the wheel. So talk to these guys because they will actually do the actual, they can actually connect you to some of these structures within the communities. In schools, you want to talk to school heads. You want to be focused on, like, let's say that when they're doing their curriculums, spend time in schools, give talks at universities, colleges, post-secondary, do that. Campaign, and I don't mean become a campaign to become president, although that would really be cool because guess what? We would then have even much more bigger impact, right? What I mean here is basically go on local radio talk shows, right? Go on local TV, write in local newspapers. I know it's been a while, some of us read the newspaper, but go to newspapers. You'll find that a lot of the people who are making decisions actually are audiences in these programs, right? You're likely to make a much bigger impact. I noticed in my own situation, I was able to reach out more when you spend time going out. Showcase at trade events. There are a lot of successful open source projects. So, for example, if you're talking about startups, right? How FLOSS can be used in startups. Think of like something as good as we just saw the Oscars, right? So Blender, everybody's talking about Blender and how that toolkit was used to do the movie Flow, right? So think about the film industry in Africa, for example. That's a huge, like it's a nascent industry, but really huge potential, and the impact is even great, right? Share that because that can actually really make a difference. Say, hey, did you know Flow won the Oscar and they use open source software? That makes a big difference, right? But above all, share, word of mouth. Again, like I told you at the beginning, talk open source, right? That really makes a difference. You can tell by the way, I'm an advocate, so I really spent a lot of time there. I won't spend much time on the others. But for the trainers, localize. If you're in a community where they don't speak English, or where it might be easier to use the local language, localize, right? Translate your content, contextualize, right? Make content relative to local environments, use real life examples. For example, if you're teaching a Python class, let me use that as an example. There's no point, it's fine to showcase how to make a game, right? But something like how to build an application to monitor crop yields at a farm, that has a much bigger impact. Also, keep in mind that the person you're teaching most times really is caring about survival, which means they need that class for a job, right? So tailor your first lessons around needs, while of course offering the requisite material, right? I've had students come to me and say, you know, I really need this job. I mean, I need this class because I need to get a job. And I've shared my own personal experience, and I say, look, I know you might think, FLOSS is this or the other, but this is what my experience has been, and this is what FLOSS has done for me. So share your experiences. The other thing is really to port your classes. Do remember that a lot of these places, they are using mobile phones. So do make it so they're portable. Elaborate where necessary. What I mean by that is when a student, for example, if you're teaching about, let's say you're teaching about how to install Linux, and you get to a point where a student is having a hard time entering the networking information, right? That is a good opportunity to go back and say, okay, these are the principles, this is what you need to do. Again, because of the background, sometimes folks don't have that. Like I said, most people are learning on the job. Above all, evangelize, and I don't mean really preaching or anything like that, but what I mean is that remember the aspects of open source, so instill that in folk, the idea of community, the idea of contributions, right? That is really key, community especially, that's key. The other group are the leaders, and again, these are mainly FLOSS communities. Do assess the needs. So, for example, if you go out in a community, look at their needs. For example, if they don't speak the language, that would be a good example. Partner with international organizations, because this allows for resource mobilization and funding. Partner with NGOs, partner with the private sector too within these countries. You would be amazed folks who open up their wallets just so they could allow you to create that facilitation between developers and provide opportunities for training too. Host whenever necessary, arrange and host local events to promote FLOSS. Again, the goal here is to raise awareness and then, of course, do engage, right? So talk to governments, talk to folks who are really making those decisions. For the coders or the developers, you really want to, deal with immediate problems, solve immediate problems, because that is key. For example, if everybody is now talking about selling online, use that as an opportunity to basically say, okay, we have a lot of solutions that offer platforms that offer online selling and buying. I'm thinking here of solutions that are easy to migrate to, easy and you can migrate to smoothly. Localize where necessary. So if there are issues to do with power, keep that in mind. Work around. If there are issues to do with internet, don't offer an app or an application or program that basically uses up a lot of internet usage, because folks will say, this takes my data and what have you. Remember, they're really paying expensively for that. And then, of course, keep it open. So in terms of licensing, you want to make sure that your licenses are not so restrictive, again, to increase engagement. And then, of course, adapt, because in Africa, it's really politics. I have mixed, so for some folks have mixed feelings on this. I had mixed feelings up to a certain point, but over the last couple of years, I've really decided you can't escape the politics. So deal with it. I mean, we've seen Ushahidi, for example, in Kenya, and all these other good, beautiful examples that really, if you can make a solution that really, or innovate a solution that addresses a civic issue, then do it. Be brave. Don't back away. Finally, for the vendors, I feel like support is really the key. You can do a lot to increase adoption in a lot of these communities. Support. So what I mean here is, yes, it can be financial in terms of money, but it can also be in terms of hardware. So you're looking at hardware, like, for example, laptops, solar equipment, internet devices, you name it. Hardware, because it's very expensive to import a lot of this hardware. A lot of times I've ended up using just regular, PCs, for example, to run a server, which doesn't really look cool. But it would be nice if that was made available to communities and especially folk who are developing some of these great applications on the ground. Engage. Again, as a vendor, you have much more clout sometimes when you're dealing with, let's say, government regulators. And with the regulators, they're really the vanguard of a lot of digital ICT policy in this country. So you really want to engage them, because most times they're even professional. So it helps you avoid the issue of kickbacks. And because a lot of times they're actually on your side. So do engage the regulators too. Offer training and certification. And above all, do, where necessary, make available incubation spaces. So that's a lot of material in such a short time, but the idea really is there are all these challenges, but I think there's also a way as FLOSS implementers we can actually increase this adoption. I actually really do believe this is very attainable. The ground is really ripe, and I do believe that adoption in the next few years in Africa, for example, will really be way up. With that, I want to open up for any questions.